morning, everyone. I have a few points on passion and excellence, and I'm going to talk through that. But I would really like if we could make this a little bit more interactive, right? So I will ask a couple of questions, and please feel free to respond. And I think we can hear each other even without a mic, so maybe we won't chase that one mic, right? I'd like to begin by saying that nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. That's Emerson's quote. It's a very old quote, and it's something that I live by. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. What is passion? Passion is something which is internal to you. It's you radiating outwards. It's your willingness to walk that extra mile. That's how I've always seen passion. Many years ago, somebody asked me, they said, what do you define as success? So in a philosophical way, it's a very difficult definition to come up with. And to my mind, a success is if you can walk the last mile with a smile on your lips and a song in your heart, which means that you are a happy person walking that extra mile to do whatever you think needs to be done with your passion and enthusiasm. What would we be without passion? Anybody? Just shout a response. What would we be? Could I unhinge this? Yeah? Thank you. That is better. What would we be without passion? Machine, robots. And it's not far in the future that there will be robots doing a lot of things for us. So one of the things that we will come to later on as I'm talking is we need to maintain our difference as human beings. Okay? Because soon there will be robots doing a lot of stuff that we are doing today. Why do we need passion? You've heard of the founder of Southwest Airlines? Yeah? Herb Kelleher? Thank you. I'm okay with this actually. He said if you instill passion in people, essentially you fill the bank. Do you agree with that? Yeah? Everyone agrees with that? Because a passionate person, what do they do for the business? What does a passionate person do for the business?
They'll keep on coming with new things and new.
Keep coming with new things. Any other responses?
Create value.
Create value. Excellent. Any other responses? They'll do one fundamental thing which is critical to your business. They will keep the consumer and the customer coming back to you. It's no good having them only today. You need to build long-term sustainable value with your customer and consumer, otherwise you don't have a business tomorrow. And a passionate consumer can actually do that. And which sort of industry would this be more important in? Services, extremely important. Because in services, it's not about what you're doing a lot of the times, it's about how you're doing it, which will make the difference. Does HR have a policy for passion? Any of you from the HR stream in this group? Are you teaching HR? Okay, you're a practitioner. I'm sorry to ask you this question, putting you on the spot. But does HR have a policy for passion? I have sometimes struggled to see in job descriptions the word that one of the important things we need to look for in people is passion. And why is that?
Tough to measure.
Tough to measure. Is it difficult to detect passion?
Easy to detect. If you give it to the manager, I'm sure he can detect.
So what, I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
Neeraj.
What Neeraj is saying that it's not difficult to detect passion. Do you think that we should have passion as one of the characteristics mentioned by companies in their job descriptions when they recruit? I've never seen it actually.
Yeah, but slightly abstruse, but some people would probably put it there and probably ignore it and so on.
they would ignore it.
Even there, people will ignore it.
Right. Can you hire passion? Can you hire passion?
What I hear is that the startups hire passion.
You know what? I think all of us have passion. Some are more expressive about their passion. Perhaps you might think I'm more expressive, and I am. And some people's passion runs quietly and deeply, and they may be less expressive about it. But I think we all have passion. And the important thing in organizations is, how do you ignite that passion? How do you bring it forward? And how do you do things in a way that that ignited passion can work constructively together in a work stream to create great things for the business and for its ecosystem? So I think it's possible to instill passion. How can you instill passion? Just some thoughts. Any thoughts? How can you instill passion? Sorry? Start rewarding passion. Okay.
With a larger purpose, people can resonate.
Okay, yes. So, exactly. So, if you can share your vision with your team and show them what is that great picture in your mind, and convince them and co-opt them into that great picture that you have in your mind, you can actually ignite that passion to work with you to achieve that great picture. And I think that's fundamental. And a lot of senior leadership, they tend to forget it sometimes, that one of the things that they cannot stop doing enough of is to share their vision, up and down the line. This is where we want to go, and this is how we can get there. And will you partner us in being part of this journey to get there? And then you can incite and ignite a lot of passion. Does passion, is it an emotion that blurs judgment? Is it wrong to have very passionate people in your team? Come on, think, say whatever you want. Is it wrong?
No, you need to maintain a balance.
You need to maintain a balance between what and what?
Between the proper marriages, okay, marriage, and
There's something called proper managers and improper managers by implication. Don't agree. Passion is part of all of us. And I don't think passion, it hasn't been discussed enough in management terms, is what I would say to you. There are studies which tell you how you can invite passion, incite passion, instill passion. How can you mold it and make it work for you? There isn't enough use of that word. But I think behind passion stands a lot of things. Stands courage, temerity, determination, commitment, giving of yourself. All of that stacks up behind passion at work. And so it's not an empty emotion. But a lot of us tend to confuse the word passion with impulsiveness. Impulsiveness is destructive because you're not often thinking enough on your feet before you respond or you make a decision. But it is very different from being passionate about something. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there can be a lot of very quiet passion. It may not demonstrate itself externally a lot. So someone criticizes passion and says, passion? You don't have any work-life balance. You destroyed it. Any comments on that? Did all of you have work-life balance when you worked? The room has a lot of diversity. Your people here, I think the bulk of you, 5 to 12 years of work experience. So, did you have a work-life balance? Difficult to maintain. Anybody else? What about some of the men? Do you have work-life balance? No, I can see a head going this way. No. Okay, so in support of the word passion, if you really love what you do, there's nothing to be done. If you love your work, and I speak from my own example, if you love your work, you don't feel you're working. So you bring down stress, you're able to achieve more because you're committed, and you're passionate about what you're doing. And I would just mention a rider that all of us, we don't live as a single individual, do we? Are we just one peg on the Google map all by ourselves? No. So we live as part of an ecosystem. It may be your primary family, it may be a married family, whatever. And I think we all have some contribution to make to that ecosystem. And to me, that balance is important, because if you don't have any balance and you're working 24/7, you disturb and actually rob your ecosystem of any input from you. And it is very important for the progress of an ecosystem to have a two-way exchange of energy all the time. And for that two-way exchange of energy, you have to put in and invest in your ecosystem. Okay? And I think that's wrong. So I do believe that if you're passionate about what you don't crib about having to work longer hours or having to output more work compared to other people. You do it as part of your mission and part of something that you want to do. But please, if you do that, please remember this, that you're part of an ecosystem and you do have a role and a responsibility with respect to that ecosystem, and you must not rob it of your inputs. It will stop giving you inputs in due course. And so that's on the work-life balance. I just want to mention that, with the democratization of technology, what's happening in all our lives is that we are tending to be 24/7 at the call of either a sound or a beeper or something from our technology systems. And I think it's very important not to get lost in that 24/7 calling and to make some time for yourself, which is away from this great invasion of technology into our lives. Is passion going out of fashion?
No.
Let me quote you a couple of examples. I was absolutely shocked. There was recently a report in the newspaper saying that an aerobridge driver caused crores of rupees of loss because he was on his mobile phone, he crashed into the aircraft. So a lot of people, and I have this great concern, a lot of people I see, they are so trigger happy. Their trigger is that little ball they keep flipping on their phone. And the point I want to make to you is, and I put it to you very harshly, would you like, if you were in an operation theatre, would you like your surgeon to look at his Facebook or to concentrate on whatever he's doing to you? So whenever you are tempted, please listen to this very seriously. Take it as a serious feedback. Whenever you are tempted, while you're deeply engrossed in your work, to look at that instrument and engage with all kinds of connections which are coming through to you, please remember this example. You would not like that surgeon to operate on you while he is on Facebook. Okay? Or a pilot. You would not like an aircraft pilot. These are my two most extreme examples that I quote to people. Would you like the pilot of your plane to actually be talking to his friends on Facebook when he's going through a storm? Or would you like him to focus on what is the job ahead of him? And it is amazing. Start looking around you, you will see how distracted we are as a people. How distracted. So companies are trying to deal with this now, saying, okay, I'll give you time to go, I'll lock everything, but I'll make a place, I'll put lots of computers there, a lot of laptops. You can go take time out and go and connect with the rest of the world through everything that you want to do. I also want to mention, and I say this to a lot of young people, I said be very clear that if you are not deeply engaged with what you're doing, okay, you are not producing excellent results, soon your job can be taken over by a robot or an e-commerce platform. Because a company will say that if it's not a company will say, but this company will say that if you are not producing enough things, maybe I can get rid of all this problem. You'll come to me every year, say, give me a raise, I want a designation, I'm going to leave you, go somewhere else. Get rid of all this, just put a machine. Okay? So it may happen not so quickly, but it may happen eventually. And I think there's another thing about passion. If you're deeply engaged in what you're doing, please remember it is meditation. It is relaxation in a sense. Because all your energies are focused on something. What is meditation? Meditation is not sitting under a tree and praying to God. Meditation is being able to focus everything on that one thing. So it's meditative if you're actually deeply engaged. So it actually helps you. And if you are deeply engaged, what can you do? You can set up a benchmark of quality. You can set up a benchmark of excellence and say, this is the way this piece of work needs to be done. Okay? And that brings me to the next point, which is excellence. So what is excellence? How can you define excellence? Anybody? What is excellence?
Doing this whatever you are doing.
Doing the best at whatever you're doing. Okay? Any other? What is excellence? Okay, so how I've looked at excellence in this context is it's a systematic manifestation of the combined passion of an organization to do things at a certain level. And there's no absolute, I think, in excellence. And while I say that, you can be very sure that whatever anybody is doing which they think is excellent, there's always a better way to do it. Okay? So there is no, you can't put a benchmark and say, this is 100. Okay? So the most efficient and effective organizations, they may reach that spot and say, today we are really one of the best. But it's a comparative index. They will compare with other companies and say, we are one of the best in the industry, right? India is 142, so we have a long way to go in this journey of efficient and effective invitation to set up business in India. Okay, but excellence for each of us can actually be your own definition of that level of quality. It can be your stamp and your hallmark that you put on something that you do, right? It's a multiplier for a business. Standards of excellence or achieving excellence is a multiplier because it's able to build business for the long term. It's got that consumer and customer coming back, building long-term trust with consumers and building trust with employees. And the other big thing it does, it's a sign of efficiency of the engine that you're running because you're using less resources to get the best output, right? In today's world, there's a lot of pressure to do more, produce more, sell more, be more competitive, keep the cost down, build up the profitability, right? So how can you achieve all of that? You need a very inspired and committed bunch of people to do that. So excellence is about aligning the organization, aligning it. It starts with that, what we discussed, aligning it with your vision and mission, defining the ethics of your organization, creating a value-based organization and defining its ethics, and then not leaving ethics to just a code of ethics, a policy. Everybody ticks all the boxes, every 6 months says I'm fully compliant, I'm completely ethical. But making sure that that becomes a way of life, of how people deal with each other, how they work in a team, and how they engage with the external environment. So it's about the vision, mission, it's about defining the values and ethics. And it's about streamlining all the systems and processes. And I want to ask you a question here. If you're a highly systematized, organized company, yeah, you have defined systems, processes, policies for everything, are you going to be innovative?
No.
Does it deter? Does it set you back on the innovation metric, if you're highly organized, systematic, process-oriented, does it set you back?
Yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
You don't think so? Okay. Anybody? How many people think that very well organized, systematized companies are not innovative? Hands up. Okay. So, most people think that they can still be innovative. So can some of you give me ideas of how they can be innovative? Being extremely well organized, systematized. You press a button and there's a 25 action point list for every process. How can they be? Please.
I think when you need to do execution, the processes are required. But when you need to develop something new, there you don't need process. If you are able to separate between them.
Can you say this to everyone? Say it.
My answer was, if you want to execute something, process was very much required so that you do it on time and without any failure. But when you want to develop something, their processes are not needed. So if a company is able to differentiate between them, so it can have best of both the worlds.
Thank you very much. Yes, very good. So what is our problem in India today as a country? We were just talking, Viresh was just talking to you, and a lot of you had things to say about what is our problem today?
The services.
No, we are lacking in this big word, execution, implementation. You build a road and then after a month it's got potholes. You make a building but the handles come off, or no, there's no one to clean it after a few months are gone. Can you quote me some examples in your personal life where you feel that we are not a society that is excellent in implementation? Can you? Anybody quote me an example?
Swachh Bharat.
Sorry?
Swachh Bharat.
Swachh Bharat. It
India
lacks
campaign.
in excellence in execution.
It lacks in execution.
Why?
It was planned in a grand way, but on the ground level, only it was done. And still, we are not so disciplined to, maintain that decorum, whatever is there.
So you have something more to say. How do you know it's not excellent?
We don't have that. If it is set by
At the individual, there is no personal participation. No, you personally, when you are a large corporate, you set up a large organizational machinery to do things. You can't be involved with everything personally. But still, you can aim for excellence in execution.
But this drive required personal participation.
Okay. Okay. Well, I don't dispute what you're saying. So my first question to a lot of people, and I bumped into someone from a very large PSU, who said, I can't even talk to you till the end of March because I'm building, she gave some number, some few thousands of toilets before 31st March. But my simple question to all of them is there water in that toilet? Is there someone to clean it? And quite often, they will not be able to give you these two responses. And to my mind, that's the first indication that it's bollocks as far as excellence in execution is concerned. You just set up an infrastructure, someone's made a lot of money to put brick and stone and sand and lime together, and there is this, tick box mentality. I've ticked my box, so I'm due for my bonus this year, but I don't care whether it works or not. Right? Yes.
No, I'd like to give an example which I faced yesterday itself in Savudu. There's a newly built flyover in the Eastern Bypass area, and it was inaugurated yesterday because our Honorable Chief Minister had given a certain timeline and deadline before the pujas, all the flyovers needed to be inaugurated. And I was very excited to take the flyover on the way back, and the time that I take to cross that stretch usually is around 45 minutes. It took me an extra 1 hour 15 minutes on the flyover. So it was a traumatic stretch where I didn't have the option also to get out of the cab and take some other route. So you were completely confined in that. So obviously, in this quick implementation, given a certain deadline, I had to tick boxes, completing these a number of flyovers before the puja for a certain political need. The actual benefit it's for us, it's for people like us who take that route. The actual benefit, I think somewhere, they have not checked it, whether it's actually useful or not, or what are the bottlenecks after it is actually open. They have never studied it. Why there was a traffic, what are the roads that were opening, because it leads to a 7-point park service road. There must be some traffic controlling that needs to be done at that end so that the flow in the flyover is regulated or in a certain stretch.
This is a common problem. So this is a common problem across flyovers in the country. You quite often, unlike this experience, you get over the flyover and then you sit at the bottom of the flyover because the traffic is jammed up. So there is somebody in this whole system of building the flyover is not doing holistic thinking. So excellence in execution is about thinking holistically. Where is the start of that project and where does it add value to the consumer? Ultimately, you have to add value to the consumer, right? You need to get the. You wanted to say something. Can you speak loudly because, or you come up?
Implementation problem that we're speaking about. Probably the Indian athletics and football, soccer that we play in India.
A bit closer to.
Is it good enough? Okay. Indian athletics and football, I guess that probably can be one of the examples. I guess we spend a lot of money and efforts building the players, but we do not go to the top level, probably at the international level.
Yeah.
Probably the cricket is one of the good examples where you can implement correctly, but not in soccer and athletics.
Right. So, just want to be more mobile. So I think the example that was just spoken about was athletics. So let's try to look within our own examples. What is it that we can do to be excellent in what we do? As a citizen, how many of us really do things which says, I've ticked my box today because I'm an excellent citizen of this country? It's very easy to point a finger. And I just want to mention, just to link to this part of the conversation, please remember, every time you point a finger, there are 4 pointing back at you. Okay? This is something that I got exposed to many years ago as I started my professional journey. I went for a program where I got exposed to this. I have never forgotten this. So right through my professional career, every time I was tempted to point a finger, I was first reminded, look in the mirror. Then point a finger. And then as a leader, you never point a finger because you are responsible for whether your teams achieve goals and the non-achievements goals. So yes, so what do we do as individuals in our own sphere to achieve excellence? So I want to, you may think this is a banal example, but I'll give it to you anyway. Even in making a sandwich, you can aim for excellence. So I don't know how many of the men here cook, or somebody at home cooks for them, their wife, their mother, or a cook. But if they didn't aim for some sort of excellence in what they put on the table, you wouldn't be so happy eating that food. Okay? And that's their normal level of excellence. But you can even aim for excellence in making a sandwich and say, you know what, with these ingredients, I'm going to turn out the best tasting sandwich that is possible. And pretty much for organizations, you organize your human capital, your financial capital, your environmental capital, and you say, this is what I have, and I'm going to try and make the best possible that there is. So, excellence can be achieved if you care more than others think is wise, if you risk more than others think is safe, and if you dream more than others think is possible. And someone I met the other day, and I was telling him, I said, I have this dream, but I don't think it will ever happen. It seems like an impossible dream. He said, that's how a dream should be. So it's good, hang on to your impossible dream. Let's see if we can sort of make it happen. Thank you very much. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to get you all thinking about these two words. I absolutely agree with you that in order to achieve excellence, you definitely need passion. And companies which are on this journey of excellence have found a way to incite passion in their employees and to bring it together and to work with this combined passion and put it into work streams which produce excellent results. Through rewarding, definitely. Okay. Open to any questions. Want me to share some experiences? I can. Yes, please.
You mentioned a very interesting point that before pointing a finger, you look in the mirror to yourself. But the question is, if you don't point a finger, how do you correct the things?
Sorry? Yeah.
If you don't point a finger, how do you correct the things? See, as a manager, as a leader, you need to point out this thing is going wrong.
Give me an example.
I faced this situation, so I don't know
Please give me
what
an
happened.
example. Please give me an example.
Let's say, like you're doing something, right, and you're dependent on somebody else to get the things done, and he is not getting the things done. So you need to point out a finger and say that, you're not doing your job, right? But what you're suggesting is look at yourself and then try to correct.
So I would say that both things are true in this situation. I'm not suggesting that you build organizations where there is no responsibility for output by an individual. I'm not suggesting that. All I'm saying is, perhaps you could spend a moment before you point that finger at him and say, you're not doing what you're supposed to do. Take a moment, be a little compassionate, and try and understand that if you believe that that man really wanted to do what he's supposed to do, what are some of the factors around him that might have prevented it? And go to ask him that very same question, why didn't you do what you're supposed to do? With that little understanding, you may come out with a different outcome. So it's not wrong to understand within an organization what is not working and to fix it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to point a finger. Because that's very punitive. And I know, I talk to a lot of young people, and these days, the young people coming in through the doorway, they think 30 seconds before they bolt through that door again. 30 seconds. And so one of the things I think this democratization of technology has done for us, it's opened up so many opportunities. And I believe in our kind of society, if you're out of a job, as an 18-year-old, you're not living on your own expenses, you're living with your parents. So there's a safety net, there's a comfort here in chucking a job and trying out something new. And I think entrepreneurship in our country, all these startups, is to an extent related to that. Because you have a roof over your head, you have food in your stomach, and you have clothes to wear. You even have an ecosystem which will support you. It'll also give you money, say, okay, you want to do this, go try it. Okay. Similarly, it works for people who are skipping and hopping jobs. They don't think twice, they just get out of the door. So if you are in a senior position where you have a lot of people working for you, be careful about pointing the finger first. Okay? Because they'll bolt through the door if they're young. They'll go elsewhere. Yes, please.
Good morning, ma'am. Yeah.
Sorry, I just after you.
Yeah.
After you. Just let him answer.
Speaking about work-life balance, the image of passion which I understood was it's quite unidimensional. As in, when a person is passionate about certain things, he's only passionate about that one thing and ignores the rest of the things. But what I strongly feel is if a person is passionate from within, he's equally passionate about his relationships, the society as a whole for a larger cause. So isn't it a better criteria for the companies or for any other hire to hire out a more passionate person vis-a-vis a qualified or a talented person?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question I see embedded in what you're saying. So it's always good for a company. I think all of us have passion, but it's not something which is stated up front in a lot of recruitment things that happen within organizations. But certainly, I think it's very good for a company to have people who are passionate, because they are usually passionate about more than one thing. I think the work-life balance I was speaking of was purely in the context of the work that's in front of you for what you've been hired in that organization. And if you wanted to achieve, standards of excellence there, or keep your stamp on something, it may take more out of you to complete that piece of work. But along with that, the other thought was that while you're doing that, and you're trying to get ahead with what you're engaged in, don't rob your ecosystem of all your time, energy, and passion, because that also needs you. So while a lot of people explain away work-life balance, saying, I love what I'm doing, I don't need so much, I don't need to do too much of balancing, I'm quite balanced. The only thing they need to remember is they need to be part of a larger system than just their desk or their work. And I think that's important. Please, there was a question at the back.
Yeah.
We
are discussing.
Yes, please.
So we've been discussing about excellence, right, and how possibly we miss it in India. So just wanted to get your thoughts on whether it's even possible to drive excellence in a country or a situation like India, right? So let's take examples. Companies or countries with similar volume, like China or our MNCs, right, where excellence is there, right? But they had to be forced upon initially. In China, it is still forced upon, right? And in all of our MNCs, TCS, Infosys, very good at process excellence. I come from Accenture, amazing at process excellence, but it has to be forced upon. In India, you cannot force it, right? So, is it even possible to drive excellence at that level in India?
I think it is possible, because if you recall, when we were talking about excellence, we said that it is not a finite standard. Each organization or group of people who are working on something need to define that bar of excellence for themselves, and it is often a comparative metric, right? So China, and I don't know if you've visited it, is in a different stratosphere from where we are. Completely different.
Yeah,
it's just, if you go there, you travel, you talk to people who do business there, it's a chalk and cheese comparison. And as you rightly said, it is because the society is ordained to behave in a certain way, and the punitive consequences of not following what the government wants you to do is very harsh. So people will always do the line. Even now, when I visited recently, and I went to a few cities, I traveled by train, I traveled by road, people will not say one wrong word, because they are so scared that they will cease to be on planet Earth if they said something. So that is a very imposed system, a dictatorship, a military rule which says you do this or you're finished. But I think it's possible in a democracy as well like ours to strive for excellence and try and get there by creating enough examples of it around the world. So I'll give you a very simple example. Very simple example. Pick an Accenture office, okay? And now go to some small office in a Bada Bazaar Lane over here in Calcutta, okay? It has a large room, but it's a very, it's dirty, there are files all over the place, people spit in the corners, okay? Now, if you created that sort of India, can you expect people to start behaving like the Accenture people? No. But if you started creating offices like the Accenture office, maybe not as large, but as clean, as well organized, right? People will change their behavior. They'll start behaving like that. And there's a very off-putted example here. The same Indians who will throw paper on the street and chuck, and I have seen this, somebody chucked a burger box out of a car on the road, okay? Catch them even dropping a hair in a foreign country if it's going to be fine. In a Singapore, you throw a stuff, they will charge you 200 Singapore.
That is because it is enforced in foreign countries.
It's enforced. But I'm just saying that if you created the environment, and therefore I want to talk about excellence in your personal space, because in your personal space you can do a lot to lead by example, to set things in order, to do them so well that the other person is tempted to follow. So our journey is harder because it's a democracy. And in a democracy, it's like an organization. You cannot tell everybody you do this otherwise I'll throw you out. Those days have gone. You know, those days have gone. Maybe in a factory or a shop floor you can say, this is the system you will follow, otherwise you don't work here. Okay? But not in a corporate environment, not in a staff function. You can't do that. So you have to necessarily share your vision, get people to agree with you, to agree to be part of that journey, and to agree to walk that extra mile. So you can't achieve excellence as an organization just because as a leader you're passionate about excellence. It's not going to work. You need the whole organization to be passionate about excellence. But I think you can do it by setting examples. I've seen lots of such examples.
I can,
Please.
I can share one.
Could we have a mic here, please? Annie, nice to meet you.
Pardon me, so what I wanted to say was, where you cannot enforce excellence.
Is where passion actually drives it. And I've seen this in Kerala. Nobody stands in queues for anything, but there's one place where you find long queues, no one breaking the queue, and everybody is disciplined. It's at the liquor shop.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You have miles and miles of people, men, standing in line and absolutely pally with each other, waiting for their liter of liquor or two. So passion can drive excellence.
Thank you for that example. Yes. There.
Welcome to IIM Calcutta once again. So my question was that when one is working in an organization, the overlap between one's individual passion and organizational goals might have a very minuscule overlap. In such a situation, what are the relative responsibilities of the individual as well as the organization?
When there's very little overlap.
Little overlap between one's passion and organizational goals. Or maybe some actions which do not have any overlap.
I have to give you that magnet, which gets all the metal pieces aligned in a particular direction. And that's what organizations typically do through their systems, processes, policies, and procedures. They organize everything in the same direction. And I think the person would have to change and would have to direction their passion to achieve what the organization wants them to achieve. And if they want to do it different, and I wanted to ask you that question, we didn't spend enough time on the innovation piece. I think if the organization is so well organized, it releases a lot of time for innovation and creativity. And you don't get lost in just repeating the day-to-day thing to try to do it better, because you already figured how to do that. So actually, I believe organizations which are well organized have more executive time and mind space to really pursue innovation and pursue creativity. So if this person's passion is somewhat misaligned, perhaps they want to do something different to what the organization is doing, and they must find a mentor or a senior person within the organization who can help them to foster that idea and see whether it would work for the company. If it doesn't work for the company will not pursue it. And the person needs to change, or they need to change to another organization.
Some organizations, for example, you heard of Tony Fish from Davos.
Sorry?
Tony Fish from Davos. He has a very unique culture. The way they hire people. You asked about whether HR will decide hiring somebody with passion. So you also spoke about customer experience and the customer engagement. So that organization only believes in customer experience and customer engagement.
Yes.
So they call it a wow. They don't call it anything else.
Yes,
they call it
yes,
wow.
yes,
So the way they hire is they have 2 sets of interviews. So a person goes through one set, which is basically the technology, technical round and all that. The second set is about the passion, about the way the person fits in the culture of that organization. And if he passes here but he doesn't clear here, he's not selected. He might be a brilliant guy, but it doesn't fit the culture and the passion of the organization. For them, the wow experience is important, and every person, even a senior VP level hire, has to do at least minimum 48 hours of customer service calling. So he has to come to the desk as soon as he's hired. Once the training gets done, he has to go and sit and take calls from the customer. So any area, whether he's a junior level guy or a senior level guy, everybody has to speak to the customer, understand the customer, because that's the business what they are in. So unless you don't know that business, you're not. So that's why they look at passion, very important. How passionate about you about the serving the customer, or how passionate about you are in engaging with the customer.
Yeah.
So
excellent example of Zappos.
Yes.
Excellent example. So maybe you want to read about it if you have already.
There's a video by Tony Hesh on YouTube. So
Yes.
he has given an entire speech on that, how he drives passion.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the example also of how very senior people actually rotate themselves through the various jobs, just to understand.
Exactly.
I think it's very important.
It's very important. Because
Yeah.
the humbleness, he says very important. If you're not humble, you're not the right fit for me.
Yes.
Because you can be a senior VP, but at the end of the day, you need to be humble.
Yes.
You need to fit my culture. If you're not serving the external customer well, how are you going to interact with my internal customer? Because you are the internal customer. For example, you might be from finance. How are you going to interact? Because I have seen finance people generally have, they're very stone-faced, so they don't have the way to interact. So they're very critical about a lot of aspects. So they need to be humble there also. So that's a very important.
So how important is humility in this journey of excellence? And that's what he was talking about. How it's very, very important for senior leaders in an organization to be extremely humble. Why is humility so important?
So, we were talking about the problem in execution. So, until and unless the top management is humble enough so that the bottom, the person working at the bottom can approach him, it is not possible to generate ideas, because most of the ideas, they are seeded from the bottom.
Ideas need not necessarily only be seeded from the bottom,
Yeah.
but I think the point you're making is you have to have the humility to be able to do every job in the organization as a leader, to know what is on the other side and whether you are really serving the consumer and the customer or not, right? Okay.
If there is, as you rightly said, if an idea is generated at the bottom, if the top management needs to be humble enough to accept that whether the idea can generate.
Yeah.
You know, there's a very simple explanation why you need to be humble. Very simple. Organizations today have access to similar kind of financial capital, human talent pools and everything else. Yet, they need to be competitive, right? So what do you work with as your fundamental tool to differentiate yourself? People. If you're not humble, you cannot work with people because they are not happy working with you. So one of the qualities of senior leaders is they are extremely humble. So the other important thing is for a leader to be able to be humble enough to be able to fly with the birds and crawl with the ants all at the same time. And that's the point about execution. If you are not, fanatically focused on your consumer and your customer, how they are being served, you're not building long-term business. And that requires you to actually crawl with the ant, and you need to have the mind space and the attitudinal space and the personality space to be able to do both those things. To be very strategic in your approach and be extremely focused on the fine points of execution to achieve excellence. Yeah. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed talking to you.